Welcome to Inside the Castle, the podcast that goes behind castle doors to have real conversations with real people about solving the nation's toughest challenges.
Hello, I am Amanda Ray Marino, Public Affairs Officer for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Logistics Activity Center in Millington, Tennessee.
And I'm Warner Buckman, a biologist for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the Jacksonville District here in Florida.
Welcome to the Build With Us podcast, where we give our listeners an opportunity to learn more about the diverse people, mission impact, and career opportunities our personnel experience within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Today, we will meet Crystal Torgerson, who is a General Supply Specialist here with me at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Logistics Activity Center in Millington. She started her career in federal service outside of the Corps of Engineers. Crystal, can you tell me a little bit about your first jobs as a federal employee?
Oh, yes. So I started my career at the commissary, actually, as a GS1.
What is a commissary?
So the commissary is a grocery store for the military. It's usually on all the bases. I started working there back in 2004, and I've been with the government ever since. And let's just say I got with the Corps of Engineers around 2009. I've been working really hard with the Corps ever since.
Let's talk about that. How did you end up working for the Corps of Engineers? What drew you to join the organization?
So initially, I was going to school to be an accountant. And I knew, based on the fact that my mother worked for the military ever since I was a kid. And I loved the fact that she had, that job stability. And that stuck in my head because I wanted a future that I could rely on. The job being there always, not worrying about whether or not I'm going to get a paycheck, especially in this day and age. So what drew me to that is I was going to get my accounting degree and I was going to try to apply for the Finance Center. While I was at school, they had a career day at the University of Memphis. I went up there, and at the time, they were only hiring for logistics positions for the Corps of Engineers. So I said, you know what? I don't really know logistics, but you know what? I'm going to take a chance on it. So I took a chance on it, and I applied, and out of 5 interview people, I was selected. And I was really amazed by that, but I think it really chose me, and I think it's been the best ever since. Been the best of my career path anyways. I no longer want to do accounting.
And so in the federal government, there's what's called a general schedule employee pipeline. And so that's what all of us are, general schedule. You're a general schedule too, Warner, I believe, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And so that is essentially a series of federal employment, and there's different grades, 1 through 15. What grade were you at the commissary?
So at the commissary, I was a GS1, and I was at the commissary for 5 years. So we didn't, get any promotions there. It was a GS1 straight for 5 years.
And what grade did you enter the Corps of Engineers as?
As a GS5, actually, in the student career program. It was great.
Okay. And what GS level are you now?
I'm a GS12.
Okay. That's a lot of growth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, congratulations on that growth. I actually started as a GS5 myself in the Jacksonville District. So it's amazing to see how far you've come and everything that you've accomplished. And I actually kind of want to dig into that a little bit more. Can you share more about your background within the Corps of Engineers, that jump from the 5 to the 12 where you are now, and that journey as you worked your way through the ranks of the Army Corps of Engineers?
Okay, yeah. So I started out as a student hire, obviously, GS5.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to school and working at the same time. And towards the end, when I was about to graduate, I asked them, I'm like, okay, so are you guys going to hire me, or do I need to start looking for another job? And at the time, I actually asked the Finance Center as well, because I was curious, getting my accounting degree. I was like, all right, well, if they will offer me, knowing that I'm getting my accounting degree, maybe I could go over there. Well, long story short, essentially, they offered a lateral 5 and supply offered me a GS7. So I ended up in supply. I have no military background, and a lot of supply deals with a lot of, military background, knowing what to do in the warehouses and how to track equipment and all that jazz. So I was basically fresh, new, starting all of that. But I learned really quickly. I had a really good mentor My property book officer at the time taught me the right way to look through the regulations and do things the proper way. From there, I was kind of stuck for a little bit. I think I was a supply tech for about 6 years. And then a new opportunity opened up when they started to do more quality data management within the Corps to try make their books and things, a little more I just better quality, essentially, just better quality data, so that whenever they do their missions and things, they know exactly what they have and at exactly the same time, and they don't have to worry about whether or not what they're looking at, this widget is the right widget for what they need for the job. So I did that. Like I said, I moved from the GS7 as a supply tech after 6 years to a asset visibility, which I supported a team at the time. And on that team, there were like 3 members, and the members were consisting of a 9, an 11, and then a 12. Just through attrition, I guess you could say, and people moving out and more people joining the team, I was able to move up and just apply for each of those positions as they became available. That's what got me to the GS12, where I now manage the asset visibility team in itself by myself.
It's quite the journey. Amazing
Yeah.
experience you have.
Yeah, it was a lot. A very long time, but at the same time, I think, everybody kept telling me in order to move up in the Corps, you've got to move around. Well, not necessarily. I stayed where I was at because, my family's here. I'm a very family-oriented person, so those values mean a lot to me. And I think with the longevity of what I know and the knowledge that I have, I've helped the Corps grow in those few years.
That actually leads me right into my next question, which is how does the Corps of Engineers mission align with your personal values and career goals?
To me, I like for things to be very precise. I'm very, data oriented. I like for things to be check the box. I like for things to be, what's the word? Everything has a set place and a set time. So that being logistics, everything has to work at the exact same time in the exact same place and have the right data. That's kind of how my values are as a personal life, because I like for my bills to be paid and my appointments to be on time and all of that jazz. So I think just my internal character plays a big role in just both work and my life in general.
Along those lines, as you're talking about your values and your career goals, what are some significant ways that your work has impacted that mission? I know you touched on it before, but just kind of wanted to hear more about it.
So when you say my career goals, you mean as far as what I've done to impact the Corps?
Yeah. So how has everything that you've done throughout your career really impacted the mission of the Corps? We know that you do logistics, and you told us a little bit about that in your questionnaire, but how does that directly relate to what the Corps does mission-wide?
What I do essentially allows the supply customers in the field to be able to, like I said before, annotate what they have on their books, have that data quality management, and be able to know. So, for instance, when the Corps has these emergency events and we go and support them, we know that we have such number of pumps for water support. We know what models and makes we have, so that we're not searching and scrounging and going, okay, what was the model of this that I need for this flood mission? So we're not having to step over ourselves to try and help and support, the Corps and the world. For me, that makes a big difference in my head, because I'm going, wow, so what I do actually trickles down. It has a downward effect, and it affects literally the entire mission and the entire world. So that to me makes me smile and makes me happy every day. And the great thing about that also is that, having that impact, I've also been able to create new tools for the Corps based on that. So for instance, when my cataloging, telling people how to account for what they have, I've noticed that different projects on different sides of the universe will be using the exact same equipment. So I would catalog, one item for one side for a project over on the West Coast that might be using it on the East Coast, but it might be a few months later. So noticing that, I actually created a platform for the Corps. It's sort of like almost like a Craigslist based, if you will, so that they can trade equipment. So for instance, when they're done with something, they can post it on the site, and instead of having to acquire that new equipment, spend thousands of dollars and man hours trying to acquire new equipment, they can actually just get it off the site and transfer it between the districts and save money in the future. And then their project dollars go further. That was one of the things I developed based on that. So I've done quite a few things with the core, but I enjoy doing the cataloging piece, I think, the most, just because of getting to see all of the cool things, because we have things from base like your farm equipment to like underwater drones. That's something I never knew the Corps did. And like they even make their own equipment where they have to piece things together, and I have to help them catalog that and account for that. So to me, that's kind of interesting at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I was just actually in the Wilmington district for a leadership program, and we got to see some of the machining that they're doing there for the dredge operations. And it's amazing to see the broad spectrum of everything the Corps does. And it sounds like you get to touch on quite a few of those mission areas, which is pretty amazing.
Yes, I do enjoy that factor. Being that I am on an enterprise level, I get to see all the different projects and the different equipment that we order, and it's very, very interesting. It kind of, I guess, turns on the nerd in me, as you will, because I like to go and look and see what exactly everything does. It's just interesting. I think that's why I enjoy logistics more than I did actually getting my accounting degree, because of that factor, because it adds actual relatability to just the numbers and not just looking at numbers and saying, okay, you added this, you subtracted this is what your balance is now. Now it's a relatability as to what that project does and how it impacts the future and things like that.
Very cool. All right. So in your journey so far, what is the most useful piece of advice that you have received?
Well, I think the most useful piece of advice is, follow the regulation and do what you're supposed to within the regulation. And if it doesn't follow that way, get guidance and do a memorandum for record and move on.
There
I
you
think
go.
that's the most useful piece is, not everything fits in a box. So you've got to make things work for the Corps, and the Corps is unique in itself, and you cannot predict, or sometimes you cannot go within the lines of the regulation. Sometimes you got to play in the gray area to get what needs to be done for the mission.
Absolutely. Do you have any useful piece of advice that you have possibly received from a mentor or something just about your career journey within the Corps? Or maybe just something that you yourself have discovered. It sounds like, don't keep your blinders on for one career goal, because there might be some amazing other opportunity out there, like you have done with logistics.
I would say that that was one of the best things I think that could have happened to me, because I could have been stovepiped into my career, into accounting, and instead I got to see the world of logistics and learn how much I love and how much it fits into my character. So yeah, being open-minded to new opportunities and new jobs and new realms that you thought you probably wouldn't have been interested in is definitely the key. And also being open-minded to the different things that the Corps does, because of the fact that we evolve and we create our own, equipment and things to make the world operate. You have to be open-minded to the fact, okay, so now I've got this new item. How do I make that fit? How do I make it fit into the puzzle? How does this help me in the future? And with the Corps, you always have to be able to move. You have to be able to, you know, not necessarily knee jerk, I would say. I'd just say be, like you said, be open-minded, be able to move left, right, and take a ball and run with it. Don't don't sit there stagnant in, doing the same thing every day. Be open-minded to learning new tasks within, because you never
Be
know, that might be your door to open.
Absolutely.
be agile.
Yeah.
Definitely sounds like agility comes into play with your job field.
You need to be able to pivot at any moment for the
Yeah,
Corps.
that's a good term. I like that one.
All right. So, Crystal, what qualities or skills do you think have been most important to your success within the organization?
I think one of the biggest things is that I'm very detail oriented, and the fact that I like honesty, integrity. So I like things to follow a path, and I like for things to be right. I don't like for things to be wrong. I like for the quality that you get out of me is the same quality you'd expect across the entire enterprise. Like I'm very, very instrumental in making sure that those things happen with my job. And I think that because I'm very data oriented and detail oriented, really, I think that plays a lot into my tasks, and because of that, I've helped many programs within the Corps.
So you already touched on this just a little bit, but this is a question I always love to ask people. What makes your day feel like it was a success? And when you're done with your workday, how do you feel like you achieved the mission?
I really feel successful for the day if I've accomplished helping the customer in the field. And what I mean by that is if I've assisted somebody with a catalog number and they've been able to add the item to the property book and get things moving, that makes me happy because I know that supports the mission. Or if I've assisted someone with our systems with the property book and saying, okay, you did this wrong, but let me teach you how to do this piece on it, that makes me feel fulfilled because I know I've shared the knowledge that I know so that they can do their jobs. And that creates the mission forward so that, every piece of the puzzle gets done so that the mission continues. And I feel accomplished when, especially whenever I have those customers that come to me and they go, you are so amazing. Thank you so much for helping me. I'm known in the field as someone that, if I don't know the answer, I will go and find you an answer one way or another. I'm not going to let you sit there and just be stumped and then you have no other resource line. I call myself somewhat of I guess you can call it like a phone a friend person because 9 times out of 10, if I don't know it, I'm going to help you. Sort of like a friend would help you. I think that's what helped me grow even my relationships within the Corps.
You're a lifeline.
And I enjoy that factor. And I think that at the end of the day makes me feel accomplished.
Absolutely. That sounds very satisfying to be able to provide that kind of mission support to the entire enterprise. So, one last question before we end. With so many years under your belt with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, what is one thing that you wish our listeners, people that don't work within the Corps of Engineers, what's one thing you wish they knew about working within this organization?
I kind of wish they knew how many moving pieces that it requires and it takes just to get just the slightest thing done. Like, for instance, when we have our emergency events or when we assist with dredging or things like that, how many pieces it actually takes for that to be accomplished. How many people that have to touch this certain widget, or how many people have to, do all these safety tasks before these boats go out, or, any of that before anything even gets accomplished. Like, yay, they see this dredging, but they don't understand how many people have to, get things ready and get certain equipment ready and get all these supplies ready so that they can even just accomplish this task for the day. And I think telling them that and then opening their eyes, it would give them a broader view of what the Corps actually does and how we actually support the world.
Thinking about that and kind of teasing that out a little bit, are there any memorable stories or experience that you feel like really exemplifies that spirit of the Corps? Or even just a fun story about underwater drones? That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, my first experience was that I had to catalog one of those, and I kept telling the person, I said, "What do you mean UAT? What's a UAT?" Or it's UAV, sorry, UAV.
UAV.
And I'm like, "What is this?" And they're like, "Underwater aquatic vehicle," or something along those lines. And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Really? What does that do?" So then I'm over here researching. For me, it's unique because of the fact that how many people do you know have an underwater vehicle that you have a remote control and you can actually watch the video as you're going underwater and viewing all this aquatic life and making sure that we're not, interrupting ecosystems and making sure the dreads and everything, everything's working properly. All of the dams, everything. It's somewhat of an eye opener, I think, and just seeing those missions and things accomplished, it kind of just makes you in awe because it's not just what we do. We don't just do waterworks. We build bridges. We check the safety of these things. We can tell you, how many inches something needs to go over, otherwise it's going to crash. It's just, I think everything we do pretty much boils down to all of our emergency missions and our daily project tasks and all of our functions that we do across the entire world. I don't know. I guess I connect the dots a lot easier than a lot of other people too, though, because I'm more detail oriented. So I actually look at the equipment and go, oh, that's that thing I cataloged. What does it do and how does it support the mission? That type thing. But I don't know that I could ever tell you one exact experience for me.
So, Crystal, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your story with us. We appreciate all that you do for the Army Corps of Engineers and our nation, and thank you for being part of this wonderful team. So if you would like to submit a question or suggestion for a guest in an upcoming edition of the Build With Us podcast, please send us a note to the email listed in the description. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again, Crystal.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this Inside the Castle podcast. To provide your feedback, email us at cw.infrastructure.team@usace.army.mil. Stay tuned for additional Inside the Castle podcasts as we explore life inside the Corps and revolutionize civil works together.